Have you ever thought that in a world full of technological advancements, an industry could change the global landscape? We always think of the US as the master of the semiconductor industry, from Intel to AMD. They have dominated the market for decades. But now China, a name that was once overlooked, is rising strongly and ready to conquer this $700 billion market. So, will the US continue to maintain its dominance, or will China take over? The answer may surprise you more than you think. China, once a mere importer of technology, is increasingly becoming a force on the international stage. No longer an outsider, it is now competing head-to-head with the US giants in the technology race. China has invested billions of dollars in research and development, aiming to build a strong semiconductor industry of its own, with names like SMIC, Silicon, and Tsinghua Unigroup gradually becoming household names. With breakthrough technologies in chip manufacturing, China has proven that it is not just a consumer, but is becoming a producer and innovator on the international stage. Not only stopping at manufacturing, China is stepping up research and development of advanced semiconductor technologies, such as 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer chips, and is aiming for 3 nanometer to catch up with big companies like Intel and TSMC. HiSilicon, a subsidiary of Huawei, has created Kirin, a powerful processor line that competes directly with Apple A-series and Qualcomm Snapdragon. A clear demonstration that China is not only catching up, but also overcoming the challenges posed by the US. Although the US and its allies have taken measures to prevent China from accessing advanced technologies, China has continuously invested in domestic resources, increasing its independence in chip manufacturing and advanced technology. With a strategy of investing in education and research, China is nurturing a generation of talented semiconductor engineers, ready to compete with the big names in the world. Not only relying on a cheap labor force, China is also transforming itself into a technology powerhouse by applying automation and AI in chip manufacturing, reducing its dependence on US suppliers. China is growing strongly, and there are few signs of stopping. At some point, the United States may have to face an undeniable truth. China has become a formidable competitor in this technology race. China is not only focused on the present, but also building a long-term strategy through education and research initiatives, nurturing generations of talented engineers, and consolidating its position in the global semiconductor industry. As China rose, the US could not sit idly by. Sanctions and export restrictions were implemented aggressively, with the aim of slowing down the development of China's semiconductor industry. The US imposed export bans on key semiconductor technologies, including important components that China could not produce domestically. With these bans, the US hoped to stop the supply of important components, such as microprocessor manufacturing machinery, causing China to face significant difficulties in developing its own technology. However, what the US did not anticipate was that, when banned, China became even more innovative. Instead of succumbing to pressure, China invested in research and development, building its own chip production lines. With billions of dollars poured into research institutes, China did not just accept the challenge, it turned it into motivation. While the US still controls a large portion of the market, China is building a solid foundation for itself, reducing its dependence on foreign supplies. The US government is like a big brother, trying to restrain the increasingly powerful little brother. But despite the bans, China continues to develop. Sometimes the control only makes the opponent more determined. With each embargo, China finds another way to produce and develop new semiconductor technologies, and in the process, they learn to master the game. So are these bans really effective, or do they just give China more momentum, helping it become a new technological superpower in the future? The US has clearly recognized that the semiconductor industry is a key factor in maintaining its global technological position. Export bans and embargoes are powerful strategic tools to slow China's development, not only in semiconductors, but also in many other technology sectors. However, this strategy is also facing many challenges, especially when China not only responds to, but also overcomes these measures. When blocked, China has not been discouraged but has found creative solutions, demonstrating a characteristic quality of a country that wants to become a technological power. The fact that China is producing its own semiconductor chips to replace imported components from the US shows that it is not only responding to sanctions, but also finding ways to get ahead and overcome the challenges. The confrontation between the US and China in the semiconductor industry is not simply a technology war. It is a battle for control of the future of the global digital economy. The US still dominates in many areas, but China is entering the game with strategic moves that threaten US dominance in the near future. As China continues to rise, the United States faces a different challenge. Not technology, but control of it. Once the head of a country with unparalleled power, former President Trump is now struggling to maintain control over social media platforms. With millions of followers on social media platforms, Trump is a symbol of technological power. But when tech companies like Twitter decide to cut him off, it's not just a personal loss. It reflects a larger crisis in how the United States deals with technological change. While China invests in technology and develops independent semiconductors, the United States continues to be embroiled in a battle over control of social media and technology platforms. The problem the U.S. is facing is not just sanctions and trade disputes, but also a failure to maintain control of its own technology, something China has been so successful at overcoming. As Trump rages about being stripped of control on social media, there is no denying that the U.S. itself is struggling to maintain its power in a new technological era. While one country struggles with its loss of control, the other is accelerating and making breakthroughs. China is driving the game, and the U.S. may not be able to keep up. China is not only developing its own semiconductors, but also building a long-term strategy to lead the next technological revolution. Meanwhile, the U.S. is struggling to maintain power in a rapidly changing digital world. While one country is struggling with the past, the other is moving boldly toward the future. The U.S. is falling behind, while China is preparing to take the lead. China is not only developing strongly in the semiconductor industry, but also building a long-term strategy to become a technology powerhouse. While the U.S. is struggling to maintain leadership in technology and information platforms, China is vigorously developing its own technology, independent of the control of U.S. companies. Trump represents the U.S.'s inability and weak response to maintain power in a turbulent technological era. While U.S. technology companies and politicians fight each other over control of data and information, China is using these challenges to consolidate a stronger technological foundation. The U.S.'s inability to maintain control over social media platforms or large technology companies shows the difficulty in controlling and shaping its own technological future. We are witnessing a shift in power not only in the semiconductor industry, but also in the global economy. While the U.S. remains firmly in the driver's seat, China has entered a period of rapid development. Not only does China continue to develop advanced semiconductor technologies, it is also on the verge of becoming the world's largest chip maker. With huge investments in research and development, China is expanding its influence globally. Highly automated factories and modern production lines in China not only reduce labor costs, but also increase productivity, allowing them to produce millions of chips per day. With the development of technologies such as 5-nanometer and 3-nanometer chips, China is creating semiconductor products that can compete directly with giants like Intel and TSMC. These chips not only serve domestic needs, but are also exported to international markets, creating a new global supply network that is not dependent on the U.S. or any other country. This means that China is not only dependent on the U.S. to provide technology, but is gradually dominating global technology markets with independent and increasingly perfect chip products. With this global strategy, China is not only focusing on domestic development, but also seeking to build sustainable trade relationships with other countries, from Europe to Southeast Asia. China is not only boosting production, but also participating in international trade agreements, even participating in important technology projects, helping to consolidate its role in the global market. But can the U.S. maintain its dominant position in the semiconductor industry, or will China completely dominate this field in the near future? While the U.S. continues to protect its economic interests through sanctions and trade barriers, China is moving forward, making technological breakthroughs and establishing a new global technology platform. With strong investment and long-term strategy, China is not only changing the semiconductor industry, but also laying the foundation for a new technological world where it can lead. The future of technology will no longer belong to the US alone. China is not only lagging behind, but is also breaking through to become a superpower in the semiconductor industry. With strategic moves and long-term investment in research, they are rapidly closing the gap with giants like Intel and TSMC and creating advanced chips that can compete directly. China is not only focusing on the domestic market, but is also expanding its influence through international trade contracts. China's involvement in global technology projects shows that it is building a solid foundation for its dominance in the technology industry, not only in the semiconductor sector, but also in other technology areas. This technology race is not only about product development, but also a battle for global power and influence. What will the U.S. have to do to maintain its position when China is ahead and continuously creating breakthroughs? We are witnessing a major turning point in the semiconductor industry. China is not only catching up, but is gradually dominating this important technology sector, challenging the U.S. position in a global technology war. The future of the semiconductor industry, like the entire technology revolution, will no longer belong to a single country. Can the U.S. hold its position, or will China become the new technology superpower? We will have to wait and see. But if you want to continue to follow the fluctuations and in-depth analysis of the global technology wars, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications on our YouTube channel. We will continue to update interesting stories about technology, economics, and the big changes that are happening. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.